Our next conversation this afternoon is a C-suite conversation featuring one of our strong Hub Week partners, Udit Batra. Udit is the CEO of Millipore Sigma, a role he has held since 2014. In that time, at the leadership of the company, he has led them through a successful acquisition of Sigma Aldrich in 2015, positioned Millipore as a top 3 life science company in their industry sector, and also got the company named as a best place to work in the Boston Globe's annual ranking of those companies in the past 2 years. So accomplishments all around. He has also been just I can't say enough about his and his team's support of Hub Week. They believe in our mission. They've helped us grow into this successful enterprise, and we're just really grateful to have civic partners, corporate civic partners like Millipore Sigma, who are willing to help make good things like this happen. And this afternoon, Udit will be joined on stage by Rick Burke, who is the founder and executive editor of Stat News. Rick, Udit.
Thanks, Brendan. Hi, everyone. I'm really thrilled to be here. First of all, before we get started, I've asked you this before, but I have to ask you about your logo, which I'd have to describe, if you all see it over there, as groovy, I think. And how many of you have seen it on, it's on, on I-95 and Route 3? How many of you have seen the big sign, the big building? All right, can you explain the history and whether you were for or against that design?
Thank you, Rick. It's always a pleasure to be at Hub Week and to see the energy and definitely the new location. Our logo is really trying to embody the playfulness of science that we have. And I would be lying if I said I understood it when it was initially proposed, right? So we are a 70% family-owned company where the Merck family has owned the business for over 350 years. And our previous chairman, towards the end of his tenure, wanted in the transformation of the group to introduce something that brought us together, right? And he basically said, look, we should have something that stands out from everyone else. And we didn't know how much it would stand out. We didn't want pictures of scientists doing experiments. We'd seen that. We of course love the patients who have who benefit from our products, but we didn't want that to be in the sea of sameness. So it was his brainchild, and he came up with this idea of having these spectacular colors. And I must say, it has grown on me.
So you really didn't like it?
Look, I should not say that I did not like it. Look, and I've been a leader for a few years, so you choose your words carefully.
You
never
choose
say
your
that
battles, right?
but look, over time it has really grown on me, and it helped us with the integration of Sigma Aldrich, right? And one thing I learned during the integration is that as we brought the logo to the different sites, and we have 60 manufacturing sites globally, 100 distribution centers. So we are a large operation around the globe, and to have everyone think similarly, it's good to have a symbol. And if you know what the symbol stands for, it really helps. And so I think we know what the symbol stands for. It stands for solving the toughest problems in life science in collaboration with great scientists and engineers globally, right? That's our purpose, but that symbol was put on every building. And you might call us crazy, but we're a whole bunch of crazy people around the world.
Well, before we get into the nuts and bolts of what you do at your company, let's talk a little about you. How did you end up atop this big life sciences player? You were born in New Delhi. You lived there till age 15. You've lived in here, Australia, New York, everywhere. Tell us how you ended up here in 2 minutes or less.
Look, if it was 1 second, I would say it's luck, right? At the end, you're fortunate to be born where you're born. You're fortunate to have a family that you have. I have parents who've given a lot towards what I do. I have a wife who left her job and said, "Look, let's pursue one of the two professional careers." I have kids who keep me energetic, and I have great colleagues. So most importantly, it's luck. But if I were to trace it back to where my curiosity for science comes, I would go back all the way to 8th grade. It was an electronics class, and our teacher said, "Look, let's build a transformer." And my dad had just brought an Atari video game from the UK. How many familiar with an Atari? Good, I don't feel so old anymore. He brought an Atari video game from the UK, but the guy forgot to bring an adapter, a transformer. I mean, imagine your kids come to you and you take the adapter away. That's what I do to mine when I don't want them to play video games. You take the adapter away. So the guy didn't bring an adapter, right? And so as a 13-year-old, I had a difficult time buying these 8D batteries, which would make this damn thing last for less than an hour, right? So when the teacher said, "Look, let's build a transformer that converts 240 volts in the wall to 12 volts DC that would power this thing," I put my hand up and I said, "Yes, I would love to learn about resistors, capacitors, everything about solenoid coils," and we built this transformer. And our living room became the second most important destination for 13-year-olds in our neighborhood.
So
just
it
just
wasn't
after
a
the
gar-
cricket field.
It wasn't a garage. It was a living room.
It was a living room eventually because it was allowed in the living room. The things were expensive. So all the kids would congregate and we would play video games. But that's where I started to have the curiosity to learn about science. And if I had to make up a job for myself today, I couldn't do it better than what I do today, right? I'm an engineer. I have a PhD in chemical engineering. I worked in the lab. I've used our products. And I think the last time we met, I showed you one of our products. It's a filter.
Let me just ask, how many of you have ever heard of the Millex filter? Does anyone here have one on you? You usually carry one. Last time we met, you had it, but unfortunately, I was very disappointed you don't have one today. But can you explain, is that your best-selling product?
Yes.
That's like Bayer and aspirin, right? That's like Millex. And tell everyone what that filter is.
So the filter is a small 0.2 micron filter, right? So our head of operations is here, Chris Ross. Put your hand up. Chris can tell you how it's made, but the story of a Millex filter is rather the story of our company. We designed the membrane, which filters 222 millimeter size particles, and it separates them. The membrane was designed here in Bedford, Massachusetts. It's manufactured today in Cork, Ireland. We cut it in Molsheim, France, and the molds are made in France, and we make it into small filters that are yay big. These filters are ubiquitous in any lab. Anybody who's worked in a lab would have heard of a Millex filter. It is used in doing biological experiments today. And I used one in my PhD. That's why I selected it as a way to talk about our company. So it gives you an idea of what a product has to go through in our supply chain. We sell thousands of it every year. And if I were to just tell you a little bit about the company beyond that, I mean, we basically have roughly 300,000 products. We are a bunch of scientists, engineers, and a whole bunch of other highly dedicated colleagues who design and manufacture everything and anything you use in a lab to do experiments, be it chemicals, be it reagents, be it tools. And we design, again, similar things to manufacture biopharmaceuticals. So if I were to describe the company simply, that's what I would say. It would take me a long time to describe all the 300,000 products, and the Millex filter is one of them.
Can you talk about your global reach and where your company operates?
So we are roughly 1/3 in North America, 1/3 in Western Europe, and 1/3 in Asia Pacific. We're roughly $7.5 billion in sales, and we're roughly 20,000+ of us around the globe.
And tell us about you're in Burlington here. Tell us about sort of the Boston experience and how that affects the company and what you do.
I think I would repeat what a lot of people know about Boston already. It's a terrific place where you have a lot of necessary capabilities to advance biopharmaceuticals all together in a small radius, right? So you have great hospitals, you have great universities, great VCs, large pharmaceutical companies. But I think what we have found is instead of just only competing for the talent that we have in this great space, where we've had more success is bringing in talent from outside of Boston and having them do what we call an INPAT, not an expat, but an INPAT assignment. You come into the headquarters and you spend time in the greater Boston area and you experience the sheer energy and sheer advancement that you can experience through the collaboration that happens in such a small space. That's, I think, for us, Boston is not just a source, it's a destination, and then the destination feeds the rest of the globe.
And talk about the difference between where you are and Kendall Square. Is that different, really, or is it just in our heads?
No, it's real. We simply can't afford to be in Kendall Square. Kendall Square is expensive. We would love to be here. Our building is 250,000 square feet. I think 250,000 square feet would bankrupt our company in Kendall Square, so we really can't afford it. Look, we are very much connected to Kendall Square, and the small biotechs and the biotech community knows us extremely well. Burlington's about 35 minutes from here and from Kendall Square. We collaborate with this community quite heavily, right? Many of them are our customers. So, for instance, as I said, we are one of the leaders in producing manufacturing equipment for biopharmaceuticals, and many of the biotechs are here, and very often they don't have the capability to take what they've discovered in the lab and make it at a scale that is necessary to get it to many patients. And so we've set up a process development facility 30 minutes away from here. They come and work with us. They take their small or large molecule, and we help them develop a process, manufacturing process, sometimes even help them make the first clinical batch so they can start their clinical study. So we collaborate heavily with colleagues in this area.
You said something very interesting before we came on stage about the cultures of different countries where you operate and how the expectations of customers are different. Can you talk a little about that?
I think what we were starting to talk about is the difference in expectations of Chinese customers. To just put it in context, the 13th five-year plan of the Chinese government envisages that 45% of biopharmaceuticals will be produced locally in China for China. Today, that number is between 12 and 15%, and that number, 45% by 2025. Right, so we're already at the end of 2019. So 5 years from now, 45%, to go from 15 to 45 is a huge challenge. But they have the whole economy wired to do so, right? So a lot of people are working towards building that industry. And when we talk to customers in China, there's something called China Speed, right? So I'll give you an example. I was talking to a CEO in China, and basically we were talking about delivering a certain component to do biopharmaceutical manufacturing. And he said to me, Udit, you know what, you really need to assemble this locally because our demand changes and you need to have, you have to have the flexibility to meet our demands. And I said, yeah, I have to think about it. I have a board. It's a 20 million investment, blah, blah, blah. He said, how fast can you do it? And I said, board meeting next quarter. And by the time I had come back 24 hours later to Boston, I had 5 emails from him detailing out what exactly he needed. And within 2 weeks, we circumvented our bureaucratic processes, and we were able to show him that we were committed to put this plant, put this distribution center there. That sort of thing, a 10 to 20 million investment, would take a much longer period of time to get approval from and commitment from customers. So he had committed that he would take most of the inventory from our distribution center. And I think that's what I mean by China Speed and China Commitment. It's a completely different level of expectation.
Let me ask you, since at the core of STAT, one of the things that our readers expect is anything CRISPR. Like we have to, like our traffic goes up when we write about CRISPR. And you all, I don't think people think of Millipore as having the two scientists who invented CRISPR, the genome editing. And that's in contention right now, and there's lawsuits and so forth. But can you fill everyone in about your company and CRISPR and where you stand?
So we've been active in gene editing, and this is Legacy Sigma Aldrich. Back from 2007, 2008, we used zinc finger nucleases to design and to edit cells, to edit genomes for cells to make them more productive. And when CRISPR-Cas9 came through, we were one of the first set of people to use it in mammalian cells for cutting and replacing the genome, and we have some foundational patents in the area. In fact, now we have roughly 20 patents in the overall area of CRISPR. First, in the foundational area of cutting and replacing the genome. Second is to have more targeted gene editing, and third, it's around areas that are difficult to reach in the genome that are protected by the chromatin. So this is where I reach the end of my scientific competence in CRISPR. But in terms of applications, we've been using CRISPR to design cells for toxicology studies. So you can mimic cell lines in your kidneys and in your liver and create them in vitro to do tox studies. We've been doing this for a while. We use gene editing techniques to design cells that produce proteins much more efficiently. And we are a leader in production of viral vectors for cell and gene therapy. So we're pretty active in the area.
And where do you fit in along the sort of, there's you all, there's the Broad, there's University of California. Where do you fit in that competition?
Look, we have foundational patents just as the other two do. In fact, with the Broad Institute, we've pooled our patents with them to provide them to the global research community, because we believe that the research community should have unfettered access to these tools, as does the Broad. So with the Broad, we have a very active collaboration in pooling our IP to get it to the research community. As far as therapeutics is concerned, when people use it for therapeutic applications, one would expect a certain financial benefit.
Beyond CRISPR, can you paint us a picture of the future, like 30 years, 40 years from now, what you all may be doing that would wow this audience?
I don't know. I think the audience probably has much higher demands than I could wow them with. But look, I think it's a terrific time to be working in biopharmaceuticals. It really is. In my 20-plus career, I have not seen so many different technologies that work so well coming from the lab into the clinic. And at the same time, and it's a paradox, I've never found us so unprepared to take them to so many people, right? So give you an example, take CAR T cell therapy. We know how expensive it is. We also know how beneficial it is for the patients who receive it. I mean, it's curative potential. But the supply chain, and we spoke about Hub Week 2 years ago, about this at Hub Week 2 years ago, the supply chain to produce it, to supply it to patients is so complex, right? And we're working to simplify it. So I believe that the pharmaceutical value chain, the way we discover drugs, the way we develop them, the way we commercialize them, will change dramatically over the next 10 to 15 years. And it must, because we need to provide all these curative therapies to patients.
As Brendan mentioned in the introduction, that you all have been named by the Globe, and I think by Boston Business Journal as one of the best places to work. My strategy at my office is just to bring in food all the time. Is what makes you so great at like being this great workplace? Is it food, or is it like more than that?
No, we ban food. We don't let people eat in the building. No, look, it's difficult to say exactly what, but I can give you a sense of what our culture is, right? And what we get energized by. We get energized by new ideas. We are problem solvers. If you drive past our building, or if you had driven past when it was being constructed, it said the home of the problem solvers. If you enter our building, it says home of the problem solvers. And what do I mean by it? I mean, innovation is something that energizes us. And if you just look at our performance over the last 4 to 5 years, I mean, we've been growing very nicely. Organic growth is ahead of everybody else in the market, or at least most players in the market. And our margins are on the high end as well. And this is largely fueled by the innovation that we see in our labs and in our community. And we think of innovation along 3 dimensions, or encouraging innovation along 3 dimensions. We are big believers in entropy. We believe that disorder leads to more creativity. So we've left our R&D departments. We have 12 different business units. We've left our R&D departments in those different business units, and we've let them operate independently, closer to the market, closer to our customers. Second, we believe that the problem statement has primacy over hierarchy, right? And in order to make sure that was happening, we created an innovation board right at the start of the acquisition of Sigma-Aldrich, where all these R&D heads come together. I presided over that meeting until about 6 months ago, and then asked another colleague to take over. And the meetings are rather technical, right? So we believe in the primacy of the problem statement. And the third is we have fun. We have fun not just with the technology, but with the business models, right? So we thought, I mean, and hierarchy is a killer of innovation, right? And we felt that if we could create startups within a large organization, that would fuel innovation. So we did 3 experiments about 3.5 years ago. We set up 3 small startups in the company around gene editing and novel modalities, around the next generation of bioprocessing and how to provide it to the folks in Kendall Square, and around connecting the labs of the future. And each of the three has been hugely successful because we appointed many CEOs. We appointed a board, which initially I chaired, and again, others are chairing them now. We invited external stakeholders to be on those boards, and we held these teams accountable like VCs do, and we've seen the success. So innovation is what drives us, but not only theoretically, rather practically.
I want to save the last 10 minutes or so for for audience questions, but before we do that, as we all know, success doesn't come without failures and setbacks, and it's a tremendous challenge to merge enterprises the way you have. What's a failure you've learned from that could maybe help our audience? Are there lessons for us all?
Look, I mean, you have to have humility as you go along, and there are many micro failures that you have to learn from. But if I were to pick one, I would say, as soon as you find someone who's not aligned with the vision that you have all created. So you work with everyone to create a vision. You work with your team. Once that vision is created, and you find people who are naysayers, you get them out. You get them out quickly. You don't keep them on the train. You say the train is going in that direction. This is the speed we all agreed to. This is the destination we all agreed to. You have only two choices. Either you're on or you're off. And we made the mistake of having people who were looking out the window, half in, half out. And I wish we had acted much more decisively, much sooner. It would have just prevented us from wasting a lot of time.
Is there a certain ruthlessness to that?
Yes and no. Ruthless to whom, right? Are you ruthless to the people who are not aligned with the vision that we all agreed to? Or are you not fair to the people who have worked hard to come up with this vision? I would argue there are more people who are aligned with the vision and who are going in a certain direction. And it's okay. You make small mistakes to avoid big ones. And I think we're fine with that.
Let's go to questions. Questions, anyone? Raise your hand and we'll bring a mic over to you. I can't believe there are no questions. Yes. And please identify yourself.
Yeah, hi, Carl Ahrens. Just wondering how the crossover between technology incorporated into biotechnology, for instance, artificial intelligence, AlphaFold, producing proteins through general adversarial networks and so forth, is going to lead us into the future.
It's a great question. We have one of the largest e-commerce channels in the industry, right? So we basically have roughly 1/4 of our business transacting through this e-commerce channel, where about 1.5 million researchers are present at any point in time. We use the technology to recommend, of course. So if you think of Amazon for life sciences and you're ordering reagents and chemicals, we use the same algorithms that Amazon uses to recommend products to customers. We use it to understand what areas are spiking up in terms of innovation. So very often customers will order something, and you can, for instance, see that people are researching the microbiome a lot these days. Gene editing is an area that people are focused on a lot. People are focused on use of AI in chemical synthesis. That's just one example. Another example is the use of artificial intelligence in coming up with more efficient routes for organic chemical synthesis. Organic chemical synthesis basically requires you to think through what is the most efficient way to make a chemical, which might be rather complex. We have taken roughly 10 million chemical reagents, 10 million chemical pathways. In fact, it was a scientist in Poland who came up with this. We worked with him to bring his company into our fold, and we're offering that to researchers globally. And we're using artificial intelligence to come up with the most efficient path to synthesize complex molecules using AI with 10 million reagents and 10 million chemical pathways, and you can imagine the permutations that it requires. So there's a lot of potential for application in at least in our area.
Yes, sir. In the back.
Hi, Jim O'Connell from Boston University. Famously, Boston back in the 1980s into the 90s lost its edge in IT, the decline of mini computers and all that. is the potential downside for life sciences in Boston at the current time when Boston is a real leader in the country and the world?
It's a great question, and it's one that comes up in technology communities a lot, right? Have we lost certain capabilities, especially to the West Coast or elsewhere? I think as a company, so I'll give you a pragmatic answer, and then I'll try to talk conceptually for the future. Pragmatically speaking, as a company, the globe is our canvas, right? So we have access to great technologists in China, for instance. We have labs in Shanghai. In fact, we've recently signed a deal with Alibaba to take our e-commerce channel and provide it and use it to provide chemicals and reagents to many customers globally. And what we find is that we can do experiments in China much faster than we can do them in the United States or in Western Europe. So what we've done is the next generation of our e-commerce channel has been designed in China and will be rolled out to the rest of the world, right? Imagine that happening. So for us, pragmatically speaking, because we have access to talent around the globe, we're able to leverage it and we're able to bring it together, provided we ask the right questions. Now to your question of loss of proximity of the talent, I would not be so binary about it. I think the training exists. The question is, can we provide interesting problems for people who we are training in this area to stay in this area? And this is a question a lot of us are addressing at a leadership level across the industry. So stay tuned, but it's a problem that we are looking at.
Hi, Udit, Kathleen Kennedy from MIT. I love how you shared your personal story and how you got here and to be the successful leader that you are. And you mentioned you've got your kids keeping you energized. I'm curious how the transistor in your living room brought out your curiosity in science. What are your kids curious about today, and what's happening in your living room?
Look, Kathleen, thank you for that question. And there is a lot of similarity, even though it's 25, 30 years apart. They are interested in video games. I mean, I think they're surrounded much more by technology than we were. The unfortunate reality today is that you can't open an iPhone as easily as you could open up a CRT TV. You can't open flat screens as easily as you were able to open up the old TVs. But what I find is, and I think it's a question of adjustment for us as well, what I find is that at least my kids, I can only talk about two, I have two boys, they learn differently than I did. Right? There are some similarities, but there are significant differences in how they imbibe information. Right? And you just hope the quality of information that they're imbibing is good, right? Because technology throws a lot of information at them. There are lots of paradoxical information, and I think they're much more mature in understanding nuances. They don't trust everything they see. As much as we would like to believe that our marketing works, it really doesn't work on the younger generation. My 15-year-old, my 12-year-old are super skeptical about what they read, about the Twitters that we see almost every day. About all the social media details that we see every single day. They are much more nuanced about their understanding. And I think that's the difference between the two generations. For them, I believe they're much more discerning of information and much more skeptical of what they see, and they're able to find good quality information themselves. But there are some similarities. They're equally curious about opening stuff, and I wouldn't be able to tell you all the stories that my wife has to tell me each time we come home and they've opened up something new that they shouldn't have opened up.
Let's get one more question. Anyone on this side? All right, anyone on this side? Yes, one final question here.
Hi there, Shimei from PO Consulting. There's a lot of discussion around climate and environment, really important topic, especially as we're stewards for future generations. What are companies like yours doing about sustainability, the circular economy, and so on? And how's that creating value?
I think it's again a great question. I don't think you can exist as a company if you don't care about the environment that you exist in, right? As a 350-year-old family-owned company, we believe that we want to leave every place that we found, every place that we are in, we want to leave it better than we found it, right? If you take that principle to its logical conclusion, the products that we come up with are now with the thought of making them sustainable. I'll give you a couple of examples. There's a solvent called Cyrene that we've introduced that substitutes, and for those of you who are chemistry nerds will quickly understand this, there are two solvents that are used heavily in labs called N-methylpyrrolidone, NMP, and DMF. These two solvents will be replaced by Cyrene, which is a green solvent, and there's a Society for Green Chemistry with which the American Chemical Society comes up with, and they ranked it as an environmentally friendly solvent. So we've introduced that. Secondly, we are a leading producer of disposable bioreactors and disposable equipment that is used to produce the leading biopharmaceuticals in the world. We've created a sustainability program where we take these back from our customers, and we use them and we recycle them, sometimes making lunch boxes after they're purified, sometimes making speed bumps, and you might have even gone over one of the speed bumps that uses some of these recycled materials. So we are pretty active in that area, and I would say it's not a choice. It is something that we believe is ingrained in what we do, and our employees remind us of it almost every day. I think as you look at companies to work for, the companies that are more socially focused and more focused on the environment for the right reasons are the ones that people want to work. Thank you for the question.
Before we go, I need an honest answer from all of you here. How many of you read STAT? Okay, well that's good. That's not bad, but everyone here, if you want to know about Millipore and life sciences and the future of life sciences, you need to go to our site, statnews.com, and just give you a 30-second history. We were founded 4 years ago by John and Linda Henry, who had owned the Boston Globe and said, we need to go beyond the Globe and do a national, international publication that writes about Boston as the epicenter of life sciences, medicine, and health, but for a national digital audience. And that's what we do, and we write about all of this. And for that reason, if you're at Hub Week and you're in Boston and you care anything about life sciences, you gotta like sign up, and it's free. Sign up for our free morning rounds newsletters.
It's terrific, and I've had the chance to talk to Rick and the colleagues. I mean, they have terrific reporters. I mean, these guys ask very incisive questions. They're deeply knowledgeable about the different segments. And I think out of all the interviews that I've done, it is one that I feel had the most content depth in terms of asking about specific questions about different areas. And it was terrific. Thank you.
Thanks for the plug. That's like, I must have been too nice to you during the interview. But anyway, thanks, everyone, and thanks for the great audience questions. I really appreciate your candor. Thanks so much.
Thank you, Rick.